Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel Books with Meena. I'm Meena and today I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in the month of January. I read a total of 7 books and overall my reading month was pretty good. I mostly liked what I read, and without further ado, let's just jump into the books that I read in the month of January. So I'll be going in chronological order of the books that I read. The first 3 books that I read are a part of a series, and so I will talk about them all together. And that is the Queen's Thieves series by Megan Whalen Turner. I read The Thief, The Queen of Attolia, and The King of Attolia. I gave them 4 stars, 4 stars, and 4.5 stars respectively. I overall really enjoyed all of these books. My favorite, of course, is King of Attolia, which is the third book in this series. And the first book, The Thief, starts out with basically a thief, and his name is Jen. He has been in prison for, I think, 6 months, maybe almost a year. I'm not sure. And he is released out of prison. And basically, the king tells him that you have to complete a certain task for me, and if you can do that, I will set you free. And if you don't do that, you are basically as good as dead. And Jen is this 15-year-old boy who is, I would say, he comes across as quite obnoxious and annoying in the first half of the book because he is constantly complaining. He does not like taking orders. He is, he answers back to his superiors, and he is also very arrogant and assured of his thieving abilities. But in the second half, Jen becomes more likable. If not likable, then he is definitely an entertaining character to read about because of his answer backs and sometimes the straightforward and blunt things that he says to his superiors is very shocking and, like I said, entertaining. And overall, the first book is very introductory into the series. You are just being introduced to the world, the characters, the mythology, the different kingdoms and queendoms that exist in this world, and their relations with each other. And the first half is kind of slow and boring. The second half does pick up pace, and there is a twist towards the end, which I totally did not see coming. If you are going to read the series, I would recommend checking out the audiobooks because the writing in all 3 of the books is pretty dry, and it can get kind of boring and tiresome to read that type of writing style, at least for me. So, yes, listen to these books on audio if possible. Then, Queen of Attolia. This one is the second book, and this one focuses much more on the characters. It really fleshes out, the main character who is Jen, and also some of the side characters who were introduced in the first book. And even the world gets expanded. There is a war going on in the second book, and the middle portion of the book really focuses on that war, which, in my opinion, was the weakest point of the book because there are a lot of info dumps regarding the war. The soldiers went to the city and they captured this island, and these ships were burnt, and there's a mountain over here, and there are passes over here. All of these things that were, basically all of these informations that were given to us in the book in paragraphs and paragraphs in the middle portion of the book. I could not picture the geography. It became boring, and none of the main characters are actually on the battlefield. They are all in the background doing their own thing. So I did not see the point of having so many info dumps about the war. But the first 30% and the last 30% of this book were, I think, very strong. Pacing wise, this book was better than the first book because right from the beginning, you are interested in the story. And I would say this book is not exactly fast paced, but it's well paced. And you do start to really get to know the characters in this one. The third book, King of Attolia, focuses on court politics, and I really like reading about court politics in fantasy. And this book was just so cleverly written. You get introduced to a new POV character in this book, which kind of made me apprehensive going into the book. I thought that maybe I might not like this book as much, but this ended up being my favorite. This one has a lot of twists and turns, and where the characters get fleshed out in the second book, in this third book, the characters really start to shine and come into their own. You really start falling in love with them, and the politics, the court intrigue part was just a lot of fun, and it keeps you guessing. And when the reveals come, it totally like surprises you. And All three of these books do have some sort of twists and turns towards the end, but I would say that none of these books really hinge on that big surprise at the end. Even the first portion of the story, where you are kind of kept in the dark, maybe sometimes, is still interesting to read because there is still a lot of things going on in the first part of the book. And Megan Willen Turner is a very clever writer. All three of these books are actually very short when compared to most fantasy books, and these stories are very much to the point. You are not given a lot of information. A lot of information is not dumped on you just for the sake of it. You only get as much part of the story and the characters and the world that is needed. So yes, I would recommend this to everyone. I really enjoyed it. The next book that I read is A Sky Beyond the Storm by Sabaa Tahir. This one is also young adult high fantasy, and this is the fourth and final book in a YA high fantasy series. The first book is called An Ember in the Ashes, and I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. I loved this book. It was a very satisfying conclusion to one of my favorite series. This book had a lot of pressure on its shoulders to live up to the previous books that I had read in the series and loved. But this one, despite not being perfect, I can definitely say that there were some inconsistencies with the magic and the plot. There was definitely some smaller plot holes, but overall, I could ignore them and I did not really care about them because I love these characters. I have been emotionally invested in this series and these characters and this world for almost 3 years now. And yes, the ending was definitely sad and it broke my heart. But there were also like some wholesome and happy moments in this book. Overall, this was, in very much um, Sabaa Tahir style. We have some amazing characters, lots of action. It's very fast paced. It breaks your heart. There is bad stuff happening all the time in this book, and the characters have to go through so much. But yes, and if you want to know, the first book, An Ember in the Ashes, is about Leia and Elias. So Leia is a scholar girl. She is spying for the rebels, so she poses as a slave in the marshal's camp. And then we have Elias, who is a marshal, and he is this elite soldier called a mask. And he is going to graduate from his academy, and he has to now live a life of ruthless killing. He doesn't want to do that, so he's planning on deserting. And both of their paths cross. And the first book is very much about the characters' personal struggles and their immediate surroundings. The second and third book do expand upon the world and the politics and the magic a lot. And the fourth book obviously ties everything together, and we have to defeat the big bad. Everything comes to a conclusion in this book, and yes, 5 out of 5 stars. I loved it. I then read All Systems Red by Martha Wells. This one is adult sci-fi. It is the first book in the Murderbot Diaries. This one is basically a novella, and it's about Murderbot, who is this AI sentient being who was basically created as a security unit. Its job is to act as like this bodyguard slash soldier, and it does not like its job at all. It likes staying at home and watching reality TV. Murderbot does not like interacting with humans. It is very awkward and shy. And so Murderbot is a very relatable character. A lot of people really like these books and this series, and I liked it, but just not as much as everyone else, and it makes me feel like I'm missing out on something. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I listened to this one on audio, and maybe that was not the best choice for me because I am not that used to reading sci-fi, and some of the scientific terminologies kind of confused me, and I just thought that the story was very short, and I just could not get that much connected to these characters and care about them in the same way that I would for a full-length novel. I don't have a lot to say. I might continue on with the series, but I might have to read the first book before jumping into the second book. I read Elatsoe next, and this one is young adult, urban fantasy slash contemporary with some magical elements. It's about Elatsoe, who's our main character, and she can basically raise the ghosts of the dead. She has a pet dog who is basically a ghost. And at the beginning of the book, Elatsoe gets to know that her cousin has died, and everybody thinks that it's an accident, but he visits her dreams and tells her that I was actually murdered, and now Elatsoe is looking into his death slash murder. And so this book is a mix of a few genres. I would say this is hard hitting contemporary because it does deal with loss of a loved one and some racial injustices that exist in our world. Elatsoe is Native American. She belongs to the Lipan Apache tribe of um, of America, and so that's the more serious, heavy, hard-hitting side of the book. Then we also have a more magical side to the book because Elatsoe has this ability to raise the ghosts of the dead. In this world, vampires also exist, and some other magical creatures do exist. Plus, we do have a little bit of a murder mystery slash maybe thriller plot. It's a very light murder mystery because, uh, you know, Elatsoe is looking into the death of a cousin. So this book mixes a few genres together, and yeah, this book does mix a few genres together, and I again gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. So many people do like this book a lot, and even I wanted to like it as much as them. But again, something about it just I could not. I just did not feel that connected to the character. It is told in first person point of view from Elatsoe's point of view, and you do get a good sense of who she is as a person. But somehow I still found the storytelling to be quite emotionally detached from the story and from Elatsoe, and even the writing style for a book that is quite serious and hard hitting and deals with some very real life issues. I found the writing to be casual, almost cheerful at times, and that threw me off a little bit. And yeah, so the first half kind of I struggled reading the book in the first half. I was not invested in the story or the characters. In the second half, I definitely became more invested and enjoyed the story more, and uh, I do appreciate all of the more real life topics that this book brings up. And I did like the fact that this book never discusses them in a heavy handed way. It just kind of gives you the story. It never is trying to beat you over the head with a certain type of social message. So, yes, 3.5 out of 5 stars. Next, I read The Weight of the Stars by Kay Ankrum. This one is again hard hitting contemporary but mixed with some sci fi elements. And this one is about Ryan, who lives in a trailer park with her younger brother, and they both are basically orphans. They have been looking after themselves for the past couple of years. They come from the wrong side of the tracks, and in school, Ryan meets this new girl called Alexandria, who is very standoffish and rude. Ryan and Alexandria get off on the wrong foot, but eventually they do become friends. So this book does feature an enemies to lovers sapphic romance, and Alexandria's mom, years and years ago, went on the space mission, and she has not yet returned. Alexandria does not know what has happened to her mom, and Alexandria has never even known her mom because she was a baby when her mom left for this space mission. And both Ryan and Alexandria are trying to figure out what has happened to the space mission, and that's where the sci-fi element book of this comes into play. And I would say this book is very light on the sci-fi. It almost exists in the background. This book is more about the characters and their friendships, their relationships. It is you know I think my favorite part about this book was the friend group. I thought that everyone was very different from one another, and some of the people were very shy, others were difficult to deal with, but at the end of the day, they cared a lot about each other and were always there for each other. This book, in contrast to Elatsoe, is told in third person point of view, but I found that I was much more emotionally connected to these characters than in Elatsoe. Also, the chapters in this book are pretty short. They are like 2-3 pages long, and that makes this book very fast to read. So overall, a very heartfelt story about friendship and relationships, and trauma and belonging, all of these things, with like a little bit of sci-fi mixed into it. I gave this one a 4.25 out of 5 stars. So that is it for my January wrap up. Just tell me if you read, comment down below if you read any of these books, and if you liked them, what did you think about them, and what did you read in the month of January. And that's it. Goodbye.